Welcome back. We're going to jump into another panel discussion, and I'm super excited about this panel. We've brought together some of the world's leading experts on various dimensions of what we're calling the great energy transition. So I'd like to welcome my panelists. I see they're popping in, and we have one more. I think Paul Browning is going to join us as well. So thank you, everybody, for taking time out of your very, very busy schedules for this discussion. Wow, where do we begin? So this discussion is going to really focus on the role of platform business models. You know, there's a lot of discussion about the challenges that we have in the energy sector, the technologies that are needed, both existing, but those that need to be developed to meet carbon reduction goals. But what has received less attention, but I think is beginning to get more focus, is how can platform business models play a role? And we look historically, there have been some efforts in the past, but I think we're seeing these broaden. So I'm very excited to have a fantastic panel joining us today. And I think Paul Browning will join us in a minute. He's the president and CEO of Mitsubishi Power and chief regional officer for Europe, Africa, the Middle East. So welcome, Paul. Great to have you. We also have Laszlo Varro, who has been the chief economist of the International Energy Agency since 2011. But has recently taken on an exciting new role, which I'll let him speak to in a minute. I'm going to introduce the other panels, and I'll come back to you, Laszlo, because you've just completed a very important report, and I would like you to say a few words about it. It'll be valuable for scene setting. Next, we have Iham Kadri, and she has a PhD, so perhaps I should call you doctor. Welcome very much. I know you're very busy. I've spoken to your team a number of times about this, so thank you very much for taking time to join us. Iham Kadri is the CEO and chairman of Solvay's executive committee. I think some of our audience in the US may not know Solvay so well, so I'm going to give you a minute to explain a little bit about the company and how old it is. It's been around for quite a while. And then finally, we have Kathy Zoe, CEO of EVgo. And I have a hard time keeping up with all the announcements that are coming out of EVgo. So I'd like to take the time that we have today to hear a little bit about what's been going on. There's so much in terms of your going public and acquisitions that you're making. So thank you again very much. And I love your background. Gives a very vivid view of that. So let me start by turning to Laszlo because he has been deeply engaged over the last, I would guess, well, several years, but in the last year or so, preparing a very important report, right? Which is the net zero carbon by 2050. And there are a few people in the world that have as comprehensive a view of all the moving pieces that are involved in the global energy system than Laszlo. And so I'm going to pose actually a very challenging question to you, which is, can you pull out 2 or 3 of the key insights from that report and share it with the team here in our audience? Because I think they would be very interested in that. And also it helps to set the scene for the rest of our conversation today.
So first of all, Peter, thank you very much for the introduction. And indeed, up until recently, I was the chief economist of the International Energy Agency before joining Shell. And I was intimately involved in developing the IEA's work on net zero emissions by 2050. And now in my new life at Shell, I will be intimately involved in this minor task of actually building that zero carbon energy system. But for the purposes of this conversation, I think the most important takeaway from the analysis of a net zero transition is that technological progress in the energy sector is not uniform. We tend to speak about a clean energy technology revolution, it would be more precise to talk about a wind, solar, and electrification revolution, because some aspects of the energy space are unfortunately not subject to a clean energy technology revolution, but we have seen truly transformative changes in the production side in wind and solar photovoltaic, and on the end use side in electrification. And as a result, the transition to a clean energy system is not going to be a copy-paste transition. We are not going to replace baseload coal plants with baseload zero carbon plants, even though I'm very much in favor of keeping nuclear power, for example. And we are not going to replace every gigajoule of hydrocarbon with an equivalent of zero carbon hydrocarbon. Is going to be also changing the energy system with a much higher level of electrification. And consequently, when we think about the amount of renewable electricity production that we will need, what we will need is not the current electricity consumption. What we need is, depending on the modeling assumptions that you take on the depth of electrification, the role of hydrogen and other things, we will need around 2 to 3 times the current electricity demand from renewable electricity. So scale really matters. And that also means that we will have to make a distinction between 2 layers of decentralization. People tend to speak about renewable energy and decentralized energy interchangeably, as if the two were the same. Whereas in fact, in the wind industry, and globally wind is still bigger than solar, in the wind industry, the direction of technological progress is that wind turbines keep getting bigger and bigger. And even in the case of solar, which can be decentralized, the majority of the investment and the really eye-catching cheap projects are gigantic ground-based solar plants. So in terms of the share production of primary energy, very much the role of large-scale renewable production will always be very important. But we see a very, very important decentralization in commercial ships and the provision of flexibility.
Leslie, your bandwidth is dropping. I was going to suggest you just turn your camera off. I'm sorry, but we can't hear you.
Okay.
Sorry. Just turn it.
But that was a good framing. So why don't we shift to Iham Kadri? Can you share with us a little bit about your company and its role in the energy sector? And I know that you have announced 3 pillars strategies for growth, and they center on platform strategies. So can you help tie these elements together and share that with us?
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Can you hear me well?
Yes, fantastic.
It works. So thank you for having me. I'm very thrilled to be part of this panel. As you said, Solvay was founded nearly 160 years ago. It's an old lady who reimagined itself along the way and aims to become an immortal brand. And we still have our reference founders' families. They own between 30 and 40% of the stock. Today, we count 23,000 employees around the world, present in 64 countries, 100 sites, 10 billion euro, one third, very well distributed between the Americas, Asia, and Europe. And this global footprint is really to be close to our customers. And we are a chemical specialty company. We are invisible. And the chemical industry, I used to call it the mother of all industries. We are inside your cars, batteries, enabling clean mobility. We are in semiconductors, smartphone, enabling 5G and connectivity. We are in your birthday cakes with natural vanillin, and we are in your bio shampoos, if you like bio products. So anyway, on energy and on mobility specifically, our core business is to lighten an object, whatever it is an object. It can be a car, an airplane, an e-bike, you know, a smartphone, right? We lighten cars with our polymers. We replace metal under the hood applications at lower total cost of ownership. We make batteries. So we circuit the batteries. We're in the membrane, in electrolytes, in the casing. We are now working on generation 5 while we sell generation 2 to make the batteries cheaper, smaller, safer, lower cost, because the cost of an electrical car, half of it was a battery a few years ago, and now is around 20–30%. So yes, you're right. We moved to platforms when I joined the company in 2019, and my aim is to unleash the potential of this beautiful company. And I adopted with the team the platform concept, creating bridges between business units, leveraging the scientific know-how, allowing the right hand to speak with the left hand in my company, because sometimes when we become a bit bigger, you know, things are not agile, entrepreneur. So we launched 3 growth platforms: a battery platform, a thermoplastic composites platform, and the latest baby, the green hydrogen platform. So that's what we do. We enable all of this to happen. I believe that the net zero, I believe in the net zero. I'm a chemist by background. I'm a doctor in chemistry. And it's funny to talk about removing the carbon, which is essential in the Mendeleev table, from our systems. And I believe it's going to be done through green hydrogen type of disruptive technologies. And I'm sure you're going to ask me more questions about that in the future.
Yeah, thank you
Back
so
to you.
much. Kathy, I'll get to you in one moment, but let me introduce Paul here and bring him into the conversation, because last year, Paul and I spoke. It had been a couple of years since we had talked, and you started asking me about platforms. And that caught my attention because, you know, you come from, you know, power background, and the business of power was selling to utilities and IPPs and industrials. And so I was very interested as to why you became interested in platform strategies, and was this driven by market, you know, developments?
Hey, thanks, Peter. Yeah, you know, my story sounds a little bit like Elon's. You know,
so did you see that one?
A 160-year-old company, and we've been in the power sector really since electricity was invented. As we look at the challenges going forward, we are really focused on the idea of decarbonizing the power sector. And we are also very much interested in green hydrogen. We're very much interested in blue hydrogen. We're very much interested in battery energy storage. We think this decade of the 2020s is going to be the decade of energy storage of all durations, with battery energy storage being in the short term, green hydrogen being for longer term storage of renewable power. We're also very interested in artificial intelligence and really, you know, viewing decarbonization and AI as 2 investable ideas that no matter what happens in the world, global pandemics, recessions, depressions, whatever, that we believe that the world is going to continue to decarbonize power, and we believe that the world is going to continue to develop artificial intelligence. When we look at those 2 areas and we think about launching new businesses like green hydrogen, you know, the technology is very important, but the business model may be even more important. And Peter, that's where we really got interested in platform thinking, and really thinking about, you know, as we construct the next business model on how we're going to, you know, help our industry succeed in these critical areas. Can we use platform thinking to accelerate the introduction of these new technologies? I'll just very briefly on, you know, green hydrogen. Green hydrogen has always had sort of a chicken and egg problem. You know, without any above ground assets to use green hydrogen, you're not going to invest in the below ground assets that you need to produce, store, and transport hydrogen. On the other hand, without all that underground stuff, you can't build the above ground stuff because you don't have access to hydrogen. We're using platform thinking to try to solve that chicken and egg problem. And you know, I'll wait until after my introduction to talk about some of the early projects we have that are starting to build green hydrogen platforms around the world.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So Kathy, wanted to ask you first to tell us a little bit about the exciting announcements that have been made. And then if you can briefly link those to how you're thinking about growing your company with the new kind of incarnation and resources that have, you know, come your way through the activities that have been happening recently.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Look, it's great to be here. So EVgo, I guess probably the biggest announcement was about a week ago Friday. We went public on the NASDAQ, so that was obviously a momentous event. and I've been asked many times, so why go public? Well, for somebody who's been in the clean energy space for over 30 years, the fact that the public markets, the public equity markets, are as excited about participating in this clean energy transition, it fills me up with joy. And so what we now have is we have an entire business plan funded, with a big bank account, so that we can go out and do what we need to do, which is our piece of this is to accelerate the transition of the transportation sector to being one that is decarbonized and clean. There have been hundreds of billions of dollars of commitments by the car companies around the world to electrify transportation. But one of the inhibiting factors that everybody's research says is those drivers won't be excited about purchasing or leasing those vehicles unless they feel ultra confident that they're going to be able to charge them wherever they go. So EVgo's particular place in that ecosystem is we're the largest public fast charging company in the United States. We have today, at the beginning of this transformation, we have over 800 locations in 34 states and 65 metro markets. The station behind me on my virtual screen happens to be next to a public park in Sacramento, but this is very, very typical. So what we do, again, at a fast charging station, you can get about 150 miles of range in about 15 minutes. The kinds of chargers that people are putting into their garages or on the workplace, called level 2, that same amount you would need about 6 hours approximately to get that same 150 miles of range. So we provide a service that's part of the ecosystem, the charging infrastructure ecosystem, that helps folks, the 30% of Americans, for example, who don't have access to home charging, fleet drivers, and anybody who's on the go. So we like to build in places where people want to be anyway, where our most typical location is in a grocery store parking lot, so that charging is not a separate destination unto itself. You go to where you're going to be anyway, and you plug in your car while you're grocery shopping, and you come out and your batteries filled up. So what are we excited about? As the number of EVs grows, I mean, again, by 2023, there will literally be hundreds of different models of electric vehicles on the market. Those automobiles need to be charged. And so we are expected to go from about 1,500 chargers now to over 16,000 over the next 5 or 6 or 7 years. And we're only one of the players. So it's very, very, very exciting. Now, if I may, just how is that a platform technology? We make money based on people using our assets. We are basically an infrastructure company, right? And if there are only a few EVs, then we don't make enough money to cover the cost. Each one of our stations is somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million, right? So we really need to have the utilization. The way the economics works for a private company is that General Motors, for example, who wants to sell their cars they're bringing to market, is paying EVgo $90 million to build some infrastructure, to build 2,750 chargers ahead of demand. The state of Virginia is paying EVgo, through a public-private partnership, paying part of the cost to build out a fast charging network across the state of Virginia. So local governments also have incentives to do this. So what the platform in EVgo's case is the ecosystem of players who share a common interest in electrifying transportation. And we're all coming to the party so that reliable, convenient charging assets get put in the ground so that to accelerate this transition to electrified transportation.
Yeah, I'm going to come back and ask you a little bit about your digital strategy, because you have an infrastructure strategy, but also a digital strategy. So let me turn back to Laszlo, because I know you've looked at the data layer that's emerging. We didn't really speak about data very much 10, 15 years ago, but now it's become quite central to the discussion about the energy transition. And so I'm wondering if you have some thoughts about what that data layer looks like and what it can do for us, and are there platform plays in that space?
Sure. So perhaps the most frightening in any energy transition model is the incredibly high numbers that the model will predict on electricity network infrastructure investment needs. Because we also observe the real life reality is that building electricity networks in any democracy is extremely difficult and subject to all sorts of delays and project management problems. Now, by all means, let's use every political opportunity to build a new infrastructure. But it's also very clear that we have to be much, much smarter in using the existing network capacity. and the systematic application of the Internet of Things on the electricity network to a considerable degree is enabled to substitute for physical network capacity. So this is one very big importance of digitization. And the other is unlocking the flexibility from the demand side, because we will have those hundreds of millions of electric cars on the road. Now, on average, if you live a middle-class lifestyle, on average, your car will need around 1 hour of level 2 charging per day. There might be cases when you drive 200 kilometers next day and the battery is empty, but on average, an average car will charge 1 hour a day, and an average car parks around 20 hours a day. So there will be plenty of flexibility inherent in the car fleet. But let's face it, the average consumer is never going to manually adjust the charging in reaction to wind and solar production patterns. It all will have to be automatic. And I should also add that just 2 weeks ago, I bought 4 kilowatt hours into my electric car in central Paris, and I was hit by a 30 euro bill, which is the equivalent of $1,000 per barrel oil price, because currently the consumer experience of an EV owner, and I'm saying that as a practicing EV owner, is like mobile phones in the 1990s. Nothing is compatible with nothing else. You have to have 5 subscriptions and 6 cars, and if you are not reading the fine print very carefully, you will be hit with ridiculous roaming charges. Now that's not good enough. I think for an EV revolution, I fully agree with Katie that we need the physical charging infrastructure. That's an absolute must, and Shell is also working on it. But we will also need to make sure that the consumer experience is as smooth and as comfortable as the consumers got used to in the gasoline age.
Wow. Okay. That's really important context. So Iam, can you tell us, going back to the hydrogen story, where does Solvay play in the hydrogen value chain? And how do you see potentially platforms working? Because hydrogen assets tend to be very localized, right? So is there common infrastructure that can be built, and how does that tie into local? So I'm interested in this dimension between, and then who are the off-takers for this?
Yeah. So like, the batteries platform, we are learning a lot from them, right? We circle the batteries, so we do what I explained already. We are involved in the green hydrogen value chain. We are both a producer, a consumer, a storage enabler company. So let me explain where we fit in the bigger picture. As you know, hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe, yet is not readily available as such on Earth. It needs to be produced, and that's the chemist speaking. So back a bit to chemistry, there are 4 main colors of H2 associated with the production mode: gray using natural gas, brown using coal, blue adding a carbon capture step to gray and brown production, and green using water and green electricity, right? So that's what we call the green hydrogen. So producing green hydrogen today comes with 3 major challenges. Driving the switch from gray, brown to green needs really the right incentives and infrastructure, like the private-public investments and collaboration Katie was talking about is so important. We cannot do it alone. And the green hydrogen produced today represents an extremely small share, less than 3%. Second, reducing the cost of green power and produce enough to accompany the shift towards green hydrogen. So we need cheaper renewables, right, available. And you're right, it will depend on the location. So it's gonna be very local. And the last but not the least is reduce the total cost of ownership beyond the power cost for green H2 production and use, reducing CapEx and OpEx to enable massive investment. So it has to be competitive and at scale to happen. Now I'm a believer. It's like the battery story of Katie, and congratulations for your IPO, right? It took what, 15, 20 years, right? I mean, the technology was already there, it's matured. The same with green hydrogen. We know we are in fuel cells as a Solvay company. We enable fuel cells, electrolyzers of hydrogen. We are in storage with our composite material we are using in aerospace these days to launch rockets. So the technology exists, but it needs again to happen at scale and competitively. I'm a believer because now I see major investments going on in hydrogen, right? So there are more than 70 billion euro of declared capex with EPC. So it's not just a slides announcement. And we estimate that Solvida's green hydrogen market will grow from $2 billion today to 60 billion by 2030 and 700 billion by 2050. So This is a great opportunity. And I believe that the net zero, we talk about decarbonization, the net zero, which is targeted in Europe by 2040, China 2060, US Biden administration joined the Paris Agreement, is not going to happen without green hydrogen. Back to you.
So I'm going to turn to Paul here. Paul, you're working on some specific projects. Can you share a little bit about what those projects look like?
Yeah, we have a project in Delta, Utah, where the last coal-fired power plant that produces power for the state of California is scheduled to retire in 2025. It's called the Intermountain Power Project. And when it retires, we're working with the Intermountain Power Agency to replace it with a combined cycle power plant that's going to be powered by green hydrogen. It's an 840 megawatt power plant. We've been given full notice to proceed. We're providing the gas turbine power island for it. So it's a real project. $1.9 billion is what Intermountain Power has announced they're investing. And as I said, we've been given full notice to proceed. Now that your next question is, where's the hydrogen coming from? We have a second project that we're developing with a partner, Magnum Development, where there happens to be a large salt dome sitting underneath the Intermountain Power Project. That's exactly the kind of salt dome that we need to store large amounts of hydrogen. So we're going to put a cavern in that salt dome that's the size of the Empire State Building. In fact, two caverns, the size of the Empire State Building. And on top of that, we're going to put 220 megawatts of electrolysis. It's going to be the largest energy storage project in the world. And we're going to be able to provide 30% of the fuel for the Intermountain Power Project when it enters commercial operation in 2025. And then we've committed that our turbines will be able to use 100% hydrogen before Intermountain Power is required to reach net zero and before their customers are required to meet their net zero targets. So, 840 megawatts is enough power to meet 1/7 of the peak demand of the city of Los Angeles. So this is a true utility scale project that's been given full notice to proceed, and we're very excited about it. The platform aspect.
And the source of the hydrogen, or the generation of the electricity needed for the hydrogen conversion?
So all of the electricity that's being used to produce that hydrogen is renewable power.
Okay.
And it's being provided by the Intermountain Power Agency through various contracts that they have in place for both wind and solar. The platform aspect of this is the next step after the salt dome is in place is we start building pipelines to take hydrogen to other parts of the Western Interconnect that need to use green hydrogen to meet their net zero targets. And so we have a joint development agreement we've announced with Puget Sound Energy in the Pacific Northwest. We're working on a project in Butte, Montana that would be another green hydrogen center. And they're all going to be pipeline connected into Delta, Utah, where we have this large salt dome. So these salt domes form sort of the basis of our platform thinking. And then we are able to go out with a whole constellation of partners and off-takers to make full utilization of this massive hydrogen storage capacity, which brings then the cost for everybody down, including other sectors outside of power. We're already talking to transportation off-takers and also industrial off-takers from this salt dome. And as we not only expand to power, but other verticals, that also helps the capacity factor, which again further reduces the cost of green hydrogen.
So does that mean that you're involved in the actual aggregation of that renewable, or do you rely on the utility to do the aggregation?
Well, for the Intermountain Power Project, we're working with the utility to provide that power. But for the other uses that I just mentioned, we are going to be either purchasing that power through power purchase agreements, or we're going to be developing our own projects. We have our own project development group that develops PV solar projects. We also have relationships with many of the project developers across the United States who develop wind and solar projects.
Right. So this is kind of a new role for vendors, right? To figure out how to aggregate a whole group of supply to be able to, you know, provide the energy needed for the conversion, right?
Yeah, and that's the platform aspect of it is, you know, somebody needed to be the convener for all of this. And, you know, Mitsubishi Heavy Industries is involved in basically every aspect of the hydrogen value chain, everything from, you know, we have rocket ships that use hydrogen as a fuel. We make compressors that compress hydrogen for pipeline transmission. We make the ships that transport liquefied and compressed hydrogen around the world, as well as ammonia. And then we make the gas turbines that convert hydrogen back into electricity. We make fuel cells. I mean, you know, we're really involved in almost every aspect of this, and we're partnering with people or other companies who are in areas where we don't participate in that segment of the value chain.
Totally makes sense. So Kathy, we have a question about where does EVgo get its electricity access? Are you working just with utilities or do you procure also? And this gets to this point of orchestrating the market. So can you explain a little bit more about how you get and I think you've made an announcement that you're 100% renewable?
Yeah, I mean, we are, there's a two-part answer to the question. We are wherever we build, we are a customer of the local utility, a commercial and industrial customer. So the actual electrons are coming through the local distribution grid. We do contract for 100% renewable energy through renewable energy certificates, though. So it is that, which is a very, very common thing to do to ensure that our drivers feel confident that indeed what we have done is we have purchased renewables equivalent to the electricity that their car is consuming to get around, and we're the only company, the only charging company that does that. Mm-hmm. People often say, well, why don't you just generate renewables on site? Well, you could, but the footprints of our stations, you would need to be 50 times larger to actually generate enough renewables locally to be able to provide enough power. I mean, each one of our, like the chargers behind me are 150 kilowatts. That's a lot of juice, right? Like that's football fields of solar panels. So we have to, in order to be renewable, we have to be buying renewable supply from elsewhere. So that's indeed what we've done.
Fantastic. And can you tell us a little bit about your recent acquisition that gave you access to an app? And are you going to open this up so third parties can also participate, or is this a closed ecosystem?
No, so what we announced earlier this week is that EVgo has acquired Recargo, which is a software company that has, among other things, has PlugShare, which is it's kind of like the Yelp for charging. It is a crowdsourced app where drivers go and rate different charging stations, and it's global. There's 1.6 million app downloads on this thing. What this software company has also done is it's developed, and this gets to your question about the digital layer, developed a really easy way to pay for charging, regardless of which charging company owns the assets, called Pay with PlugShare. And one of the things that EVgo is eternally committed to is making the driver experience easy and seamless. So the acquisition, EVgo has interoperability agreements with a couple of the different charging companies in the United States. I mean, as Laszlo pointed out, in Europe, there are many, many different sorts of charging companies. It's a much, much more disaggregated sector than in the United States, where there are many fewer players. But even so, what we're committed to at EVgo is making it very, very seamless, so that if you happen to be near a charging, you're an EVgo member, but you happen to be near a charger that is not part of EVgo's asset base, we want to make it easy for you to go just charge there, and then behind the curtain, the two companies will exchange and make sure that we get paid for the electrons that were dispensed. So acquisition of Recargo and all of those really smart folks that have developed these applications to enhance the driver experience is what we're super excited about.
Fantastic. So Ihan, can you tell us a little bit, you've mentioned batteries a couple of times, and I know that there's a lot of focus on recovery given the environmental impact of batteries. Are you thinking of a platform strategy with respect to both the design the utilization, but also the recovery of batteries in the economy?
Yeah, definitely. And it's a great, question. A year ago, we launched our sustainability roadmap called Solving One Planet. And while historically the chemical industry was much focused on CO2 emissions or greenhouse gas emission, very little or less has been given, attention to resources optimization and circularity, right? So we launched our Solving One Planet, which was bolder. We joined the Paris Agreement, the SBTi, and we announced that we are going to become more circular. So in the case of batteries, we recently partnered with Veolia and Renault. So actually it's a great platform, examples, because we cannot do it alone, specifically when it comes to circularity, to create a consortium endorsed by Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which enables the production of circular electric EV batteries. So once the batteries are crushed, we manage to separate and recover all the precious metal, be it copper, aluminium, cobalt, nickel, manganese, and you name them, and lithium, of course, contained in the battery of electrical batteries, and finally to reuse them in the manufacture of new batteries, avoiding metal extraction from mines overseas, right, and waste. So Veolia, our partner, has the logistics network, their waste management company, and experience in lithium-ion battery dismantling and recycling. And we do know as a chemist how to separate products, right? And in March 2021, so very recently, Renault joined the consortium, and this is a key player in the EV battery, and we are looking for more for other OEMs with whom we are speaking as we speak. And this is great because we have a supplier of the waste and a potential customer. So this is a beautiful example of circularity, de-risking a project because it needs to make money. So obviously the IRR and returns are not good when you start such a project, but the innovation is there rather than burning products or putting them in the landfill, which is still cheaper than recycling in many states around the world. We are trying now to build a business case together and de-risk it. And coming to our needs and gaps as an industry, we need more circularity embedded in the way we innovate. The way we innovate in the past history is very linear. You do things and you throw them to the bin. You don't do it with your clothes, obviously. So we are rethinking our products. We are rethinking them from day one, how they can be recycled, they can be circular again and again, and they can become digital and smarter. Back to you.
That's great. That's really impressive. So Laszlo, you've told us that you're joining Shell. You've joined Shell. There's a lot of questions about how the big oil companies make this transition. Does Shell have to create a whole new workforce, or are there internal capabilities, both from a technology, intellectual capital, that are actually gives the oil majors a competitive advantage, or at least a fighting chance in this great energy transition?
So there's no doubt that there will be capability developments. So if you go on Shell web page, there will be dozens of job advertisements, and we are looking for data analytics, electricity specialists, green energy project developers, and so on. But there are also very important skills in the existing company which can be leveraged. One is the global scale of the company. Shell built the first fast charging station in Manila. Shell built the first fast charging station in Lima, and we are in the process of building the first fast charging station in Karachi, Pakistan. Shell has been operating in these countries for 100 years. We have boots on the ground. We can use that skill. Also, Shell is not 160 years old yet, only 140, but we started as a trading company. So we also have noticed that there are many investors, insurance companies, infrastructure investors who are 100% comfortable putting their equity into renewable projects, but they want a long-term contract with a stable cash flow, and they don't want to trade with electricity. So there have been a series of projects, both in Europe, in North America, and Australia, where Shell did not invest in the equity of the solar farm or the wind farm, but we are the off-taker of the electricity. We take it into our portfolio. we trade it, we match it with our demand side assets, with our flexibility assets. And also, Shell is currently supplying around 100 million cars. And we have no doubt that in the future, it will be 100 million electric cars. So we already have more electric car charging points than gas stations. Now, I'm cheating a bit because of the energy density of gasoline, you need around a dozen electric car charging points to replace a gas station. But in the foreseeable future, we are going to have this 10-to-1 ratio. So we also have a lot of experience in actually engaging consumers and providing that seamless comfort for consumers that it is needed. But let me assure you that there is a very strong awareness in the company that there is a need for capability building, and there is a need for both retraining people from the existing businesses and also bringing in new people into the company.
That's great. So Paul, I have a similar question, which is, do you find that the platform thinking is readily available in Mitsubishi, or do you find that you're struggling a little bit to get that thinking into the organization, and how are you going about that?
Well, Peter, one of the things we've done is we've worked with you and some of your students at Dartmouth to sort of expose some of our business leaders to platform thinking. Doing some projects with your team, I think, helped open our team's mind to how we could use platform thinking and what we were looking to do. And beyond that, I'd say we've got a lot of, we're an engineering team or an engineering company. I'm an engineer. We have a lot of people who are good at learning new things and adapting them to what our industry needs to do. So it's been mostly, I would say, internal development of our existing folks. But as we move into the next phases of this, we're definitely hiring to raise our IQ in areas like platform thinking and a few other areas where we need to get smarter in order to move into the future.
Fantastic. Kathy, I have a similar question. Do you find, the talent that you need to be able to drive this dual strategy of infrastructure, these apps and data layer, how is it going with respect to finding the talent you need to drive the next phase of growth for EVgo?
During COVID, we've actually increased our staff by about 40%. So, and since we were all working remotely,
wow.
I didn't have many of us haven't met each other. So when somebody comes on, I always do kind of an intro Zoom call. And the first question I have is sort of, wow, you've got this great background. Why did you decide to join EVgo? And they said, because I want to do something with a mission orientation. I want to know that every day I'm working, yes, to earn a living, but to also make the world a better place. And addressing climate change is what I'm all about. And so we don't find it hard to attract great talent at all. From our perspective, one of the most interesting things is that we can't be successful as a company, though, unless utilities are on board and unless state governments are on board, unless site hosts that are going to allow us to build chargers in their parking lots are on board. And even though everybody's sort of leaning forward, these are often very large organizations that don't move quickly. So we have initiated this spring, a project called Connect the Watts. And we're building an ecosystem, a community of players and entities that are interested, that share the aspiration of electrifying transportation, but have little experience with it. Like local government authorities have to sign off on a charging station. They've never done that before. We get to them and they say, oh, maybe I need to check with our town architect. Maybe I need to get the landscape guy involved. We've got hundreds of proposals stuck in front of local government authorities, not because they're opposing, but because this is new and they've never done it. So what we're endeavoring to do in terms of the platform is, as I say, create this community where we can share best practice on every stage of getting a fast charger to life. I mean, it takes us 4 to 8 weeks to actually build a fast charging station. But at the moment, it's taking us 18 months to go from signed contract with a site host to energization by the utility. We need to, if we're going to address transportation electrification, compress that to 6 months.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much. We're at the bottom of the hour. And so I really appreciate you all taking time out of your busy days to help us think about this great energy transition and the role of platforms and how all of, you all work for amazing companies with amazing technology. And obviously we just heard with talent that's now thinking about this in new ways. So really, really inspiring actually. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. And that'll do it for this session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Evan, we're going to turn it over to you. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Peter. So that was a jam-packed morning and we have more to come. And now it's your chance to jump onto another platform yourself. So we're going to take a 15-minute break from now until 11:45. And you can use that time however you want, but I would suggest checking out Twine and doing some networking. So if you go ahead and click the join a networking session button on the top of your screen, you will be put and matched with one of the other participants in the program. So enjoy that. We'll see you in 15 minutes at 11:45.